The wind shifted a little after midnight. I was still awake, watching the mast light rock against the sky. The anchor was holding fine, and the sea had calmed since sunset, but I kept the boom centered and tight just in case we got hit with a gust. Out here, even small noises get your attention. You learn to tell the difference between a wave hitting the hull and something worse. I'm about 7 miles off the coast, near one of the old spots I used to fish, south of the Big Bend. There's a sandy bottom here with enough depth to keep us clear of the coral heads. I've anchored here 100 times over the years. The GPS isn't always reliable anymore, so I'm back to checking bearings by eye. But this place I know by feel. It's quiet. Just ocean in every direction and a few stars where the clouds haven't swallowed them. Maribel is steady. She's an old ketch I've owned since I was in my 30s. Not fast, not pretty, but I know every bolt, every soft spot in the deck, every system. She's taken care of me for years. I used to run charters off her back in the day, then retired to her full-time after my wife passed. She was never meant to be some doomsday lifeboat, but now that's what she is, at least for me. I left Clearwater the day before the bridges got shut. The marina was already thinning out, sailors casting off early, no goodbyes, just quiet departures. You could feel something was coming even before the news stopped pretending things were fine. I kept to myself and worked through the night, topped off the fuel drums, cleaned the water tanks, loaded every can and bag of food I could fit. I used my marina access card one last time to roll a dock cart of supplies down to the slip, then pulled the lines without ceremony. Nobody stopped me. They were too busy packing or panicking or already gone. I've been moving in and out from shore ever since. Not too far, not too close. I try to stay where the VHF picks up something, but far enough that nobody can see me easily from land. I'm not trying to advertise. At this point, people are more dangerous than the infected. Not all of them maybe, but enough. And I've always felt safer at sea than on a crowded street. The first few days were mostly about settling into a routine. I wake up with the sun, check the lines, take a look at the horizon with binoculars. I log the weather, inventory supplies, fish when I can. I keep the deck clean. That's a habit I've never broken. Sloppy lines get people hurt, and I'm the only one left to hurt out here. Radio chatter used to pop up now and then. Coast Guard loops, some emergency channels. But I haven't heard a voice in almost 2 full days. Just static, automated alerts, and sometimes nothing at all. I keep calling in once a day. Sailing vessel Maribel, located approximately 7 nautical miles offshore, broadcasting on channel 16, requesting contact. I don't expect an answer, but saying it out loud makes it feel less like I disappeared. I've been writing logs by hand again. I used to keep everything on my laptop, but I'm conserving power. I have 2 spare batteries charged from solar, but I don't know how long I'll be out here. Ink on paper lasts longer anyway. I mark the date, the wind, any signals I catch, and then a few lines about what I saw. Yesterday I wrote, no boats in sight. 1 floating hull drifting northwest. Sky clear, no birds. That last part's the one that unsettles me. The water is calm. The temperatures are normal for this time of year, but it's too quiet. I haven't seen a single pelican or gull since the second night out. No bait balls. No surface feeding. The sea hasn't emptied. There are still fish. I caught a decent snapper 2 days ago, but it feels off. Animals usually know before we do when something is wrong. I keep watching the water like it's going to tell me something. I've only seen 1 body so far. It floated past on the 3rd day. Face down, bloated, clothes still clinging to it. Looked like it came from the mainland. Maybe off a dock or swept out from a canal. I didn't go near it. I don't know how the virus spreads. I don't want to find out. I'm not armed like some of the other guys were. Back in port, the liverboard guys always talked about carrying pistols or shotguns. I never bothered. Out here, my tools are my weapons. A solid oar, a gaff hook, a flare gun. If someone boards this boat uninvited, it's going to be close quarters anyway. At that point, it's muscle and intent that matter more than caliber. Food's holding. I have 40-something cans of mixed stuff. Beans, soups, stews, a few packs of rice and dried lentils, 4 gallons of potable water in containers, plus the main tank which I cleaned and refilled just before I left. I rigged a rain catch system with an old tarp and some tubing, so as long as I keep it clean, that should get me through the dry stretches. I boiled a pot this morning and had instant coffee. Tastes like chemical mud, but better than nothing. The worst part is the stillness. I've always liked being alone on the water. It used to be peaceful, but this is different. This isn't solitude, it's absence. No radio voices, no aircraft overhead, no wakes in the distance. Just an empty horizon and the creak of lines pulling against the mast. I haven't had a full night's sleep since I left. I sleep in shifts, maybe 45 minutes at a time. I keep a headlamp and knife near my bunk. I check the bilge every morning and again before dark. I go through every mechanical system daily. Engine, fuel filter, rigging, solar charger. Not because something's broken, but because I need to stay moving. A quiet boat will mess with your head if you let it. I've started talking out loud more. Just simple things, narrating what I'm doing. Okay, check the tank level, clean the strainer. Things like that. It helps to hear a voice, even if it's mine. I don't know how long I'll be alone, but I'm preparing like it'll be a while. I've kept the skiff tied to the stern, engine tilted out of the water. It's a backup in case I need to move fast. Fuel's limited, but I've got about 15 gallons between 2 tanks. Enough for short jumps. I don't want to go ashore unless I absolutely have to. The last thing I saw before I left the marina was a woman banging on the dock gate, her arm bloodied, screaming at no one in particular. She was limping. Could have been a cut, could have been a bite. I turned and walked the other way. That image has been stuck with me since. Today was clear. Wind came up from the north around 10 in the morning. I spent the day checking my storm lines and resecuring the jib sheets. Sun's getting hotter. I rigged some shade on the aft deck with canvas and spare line. Might throw a fishing line in again tomorrow. Try for something fresh before the next cold front rolls through. I saw another sailboat on the horizon just after noon. Bare mast, no sails. Drifting. Binoculars showed no movement. Looked like one of the charter types. Maybe 35 feet. White hull. I marked its bearing and watched it fade. Didn't go near. There are too many questions and not enough answers now. I'll finish this entry and power down the inverter. Preserve the batteries. I'll leave the masthead light on, just in case someone out there's looking. Maybe someone still listens. Maybe not. Either way, I'm still here. I don't know what day the outbreak officially started. I don't know if there was a single moment or just a wave that spread too far to hold back. I was already halfway out the door before the news stopped pretending it was local. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Maybe 3. Doesn't matter now. It only matters what I see and hear out here. The morning started with cloud cover, low and heavy. I came up just after first light and checked the anchorage. No drift. The anchor chain held. Wind was light from the west. I left the mainsail bagged and used the battery to power the windlass just long enough to bring in half the road. I let us drift south a few hundred yards before resetting, trying to stay unpredictable. If someone's watching with binoculars from shore, I don't want them tracking me by position. Fishing was poor. I trailed a spoon off the stern with a bit of flash wire, ran the tiller low, and drifted with no engine to keep noise down. No hits. I swapped rigs twice and came up with nothing. That's unusual for these waters, especially in the morning when the sun's behind the clouds. I marked the lack of activity in the notebook again. I've logged 5 days without seeing surface baitfish. I'm not a marine biologist, but that's not normal. Around mid-morning, I heard something that made me stand up fast. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't sea noise either. A kind of distant metal-on-metal sound, hard to place over the water. I grabbed the binoculars and scanned full circle from the cockpit. Took a few minutes before I spotted it. A small runabout, maybe a 15-footer, drifting about a quarter mile off my bow. The paint was faded, but it looked recent. No one visible aboard. I dropped the binoculars and turned the tiller to bring us closer. Not direct. I came around from the port side in case someone was inside watching. I kept the engine off. No need to make noise. I used the backup paddle to give small adjustments. As I closed the distance, I saw the outboard engine was tilted up. There was no flag, no registration visible, and the bow sat low in the water like it had taken on weight. I tied a fender to the starboard rail and came up slowly. The skiff bumped against us once with a dull knock. I climbed up onto Maribel's cabin roof for a better angle and looked straight down. There was a cooler inside. The lid was missing. Water sloshed around the deck and a tangle of soaked rope was bunched in the middle. No visible blood. No movement. Still, I waited 10 minutes before doing anything. I sat on the deck, line in hand, and watched the skiff float. It didn't respond to wind or current the way it should have. Something was off with the balance. Eventually I tied a short line, leaned over the rail, and hooked the skiff's side cleat with a boat hook. Brought it in gently and looped it. I didn't board. I leaned over from my deck and used a long gaff to poke through the contents. The cooler was full of seawater. Inside was what looked like canned food, labels mostly gone, but definitely factory-sealed tins. The rope was knotted in places and smelled of old oil. One side of the skiff's hull had deep scratches along the gunnel, like it had rubbed against rock or dock concrete under pressure. Still no bodies, no blood. I hauled the cooler up with a pulley. The food was mostly salvageable. I rinsed the cans in bleach water, spread them out on a towel to dry, and noted the inventory. 2 cans of chicken, 1 of pears, a few others too rusted to identify. I marked the source skiff as questionable, but noted no immediate biological risk. The whole time, the boat stayed tied off, bobbing gently off my starboard side. By mid-afternoon, the wind dropped to nothing. Sea turned to glass. Not a breath of motion anywhere. It was hot and still, and quiet enough that I could hear the halyard clicking faintly against the mast despite it being tied off. I kept the deck in order, mopped the cockpit, then checked the water tanks again. I was at 70% total capacity. The rain catch setup filled about a quarter gallon last night, but the humidity today looked promising. I cleaned the tarp again just in case we got a squall. The radio stayed dead all day. I scanned every usable frequency every 2 hours, like I've been doing. Weatherband repeated the same signal twice. No voice updates. No location beacons. The emergency transponder light hasn't picked up anything new. There's no one out here. Or if there is, they're staying quiet. Right before dusk, I took down the skiff, loosened the line, pushed it a few feet off with the gaff, let it drift. Something about it was wrong. The way it stayed balanced in the water, the way it rocked without wind. I didn't like it that close. If it comes back in the night, I'll cut it free. Sunset was clean. No clouds on the western horizon. I saw the burn line on shore again, a haze of smoke curling up from behind the inland trees. I don't know what town that is from here. Maybe Tarpon Springs. Maybe something smaller. It doesn't matter. No one's putting out the fires anymore. I powered down at full dark, kept the LED lamp running for a while below deck to read. The boat rocked gently all evening. Wind shifted eastward around 10. I tied off the tiller and went below just before 11. I woke at some point in the middle of the night. Couldn't say what time it was. Maybe a few hours past midnight. The sound that brought me up wasn't loud, but it wasn't normal. Something bumped the hull. I pulled on my boots and came up with the flashlight. The deck was slick with condensation. I scanned the water. At first I thought it was the same skiff, but it wasn't. This one had drifted up from the stern and wedged itself softly against my rudder. A smaller boat, fiberglass, maybe 10 feet, no motor, just oars. One oar was hanging half into the water, the other rested across the middle seat. The thing that made me freeze wasn't the boat. It was the sound coming from it. A low rasp, like breathing forced through waterlogged lungs. I turned off the flashlight and dropped to one knee behind the main sheet winch. Waited. The sound came again, slow, dragged out, broken in rhythm. I slid forward along the cabin roof and peeked over the edge. There was a man crouched inside the skiff, not moving much, shoulders hunched, face lowered, clothes soaked. I couldn't see blood, but the posture was wrong. He wasn't resting or sleeping. His arms twitched now and then, like he was barely aware of where they were. I whispered once, no response, just another slow groan. That's when I knew. I didn't wait for him to climb aboard. I grabbed the nearest oar, stepped back, and slammed it down across the edge of the skiff. The first hit made him lurch upward. His eyes opened, but they didn't see me. They were milked over, empty. He started to rise. No scream, just movement. I hit him again, across the side of the neck, trying to knock him back. The skiff rocked hard. I lost footing for a second, but stayed on the rail. He didn't fall. He reached forward, trying to grip the side of my boat. I hit him 3 more times. The last one cracked his jaw sideways and he dropped out of sight. Splash, water churned, but he didn't go under. He floated, arms moving, trying to find the boat again. I couldn't believe it. He wasn't swimming, just drifting, arms twitching toward anything solid, mouth still open, making that sound. I leaned out, grabbed the same oar, and jammed it down hard on his head. Once, twice, 3 times. The last strike stopped him from moving. His body rolled with the water, still afloat but limp. I stood there for a long time, oar still in hand, staring at the spot where he'd been. The skiff had drifted a few feet away. The water was calm again. No more sound. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I stayed on deck, knife in my pocket, flashlight off, eyes on the water. This changes things. I've seen death before. I've seen what the ocean can do to a body. But that thing wasn't just a floater. It was moving. It was hunting. I don't know how long it had been like that. If it climbed into the skiff hours before, or was tossed in just offshore and drifted out. Doesn't matter now. The important part is that it got close. I didn't see it coming. It touched my hull. That's closer than I ever wanted to let anything get again. By first light, I was already taking steps. I rigged a second noise line using some old copper wire and screws, ran it along the port side where the skiff came in, tied washers to the ends, and let them hang over the edge. If anything bumps us again, I'll hear it. I closed the forward hatch, locked the companionway from the inside, and moved all my tools to within arm's reach. There's a claw hammer on the navigation bench now, not because I plan to use it, but because I might have to. The sea was flat again, nothing moving. The skiff had vanished sometime before dawn. I don't know if it drifted off or sank after being knocked around. I searched the perimeter with binoculars. No sign of it. The infected, whatever that man was, still floated off the starboard side for a few hours. He eventually drifted toward the bow and then disappeared. Either current took him or something pulled him under. I didn't follow. I didn't want to know. It's been 12 days since I left Clearwater. If anyone's still broadcasting, they're not doing it near here. The radio's been silent for 3 days. No Coast Guard, no NOAA advisories, no Maydays. Just static and occasional bursts of digital hash that might be automated systems trying to reconnect. Or it could be solar interference. Hard to tell without a working spectrum analyzer. Around midday, the air pressure dropped fast. I watched the barometer dip in real time. That's never good. 30 minutes later, fog rolled in so fast it felt unnatural. I've seen sea fogs plenty of times in the Gulf. Usually you get some warning. A cold tongue of air hits the warm surface and builds over time. But this one came fast, like someone dumped a white curtain over the world. Visibility dropped to maybe 30 feet in under 15 minutes. I couldn't see the mast light from the bow. I turned on the deck light, but it didn't help. The beam just bounced back off the haze and made everything look worse. I shut it off and moved slow. No engine, just drifted. Sails were down, and I wasn't about to raise them blind. There's a reef not far to the north. Last thing I need is to beach Maribel just because I wanted better air circulation. I stayed mostly below deck with the VHF on, switching between scan and manual tuning. I kept the flare gun out on the chart table and listened to the fog tap against the rigging. It's a weird thing. The way sound changes in fog. You stop trusting your ears. What sounds like a distant thump could be a wave against your hull, or a hand on the rail. That night I didn't sleep at all. I laid on the bunk, back against the hull, flashlight on low beam aimed at the hatch. The cabin stayed humid. Everything felt damp, even with the vents cracked. I turned the fan on twice and then turned it off again. Battery draw's too risky right now. I want to keep enough power in reserve for emergencies. I tried to read an old paperback I had shoved in a locker. Couldn't focus. Every time something creaked above me, I looked up. Once, I thought I heard the same rasping sound I'd heard from the skiff. It was probably wind across the lifelines. Probably. But I held the knife in my right hand until sunrise anyway. When the light came back, the fog didn't clear. The air stayed heavy and close. I opened the hatch slow and stepped out barefoot. The deck was wet. I moved quiet, listening for any splashes or other boats. Then I saw it, off the port side, maybe 20 feet away, another sailboat. At first, I thought it was just anchored nearby, but the angle was wrong. No anchor line, no sway. It was drifting. I could barely see the shape of the hull through the fog. It was closer than I would have liked, smaller than Maribel, maybe 32 feet. No sails up. The jib had torn free and hung like a soaked rag off the forestay. There was something hanging over the rail, lines, or cloth, or something else. I couldn't tell yet. I didn't hail them. I don't hail anyone anymore. I watched instead, waited for motion. After 2 minutes, I still hadn't seen anything. I pulled on a jacket, grabbed the binoculars, and stepped onto the deckhouse for a better angle. I scanned the cockpit first. No one at the helm. Looked empty. Then, I caught sight of a leg sticking out from the companionway. It wasn't moving. The foot was bare and pale. No blood, no visible damage from what I could see. Just still. I watched another few minutes, then started counting all the details. Stern nameplate, half missing. Letters read Esperan, before chipping off. Aft rail, bent slightly inward. Could have been from a collision. Port lifeline was cut near the bow, and the cloth that hung over the side. It wasn't a sail, it was clothing. Dozens of articles, maybe more. Shirts, pants, tangled and soaked, and draped over the rail like they'd been used to dry something off and forgotten. I didn't board. I tied a spare line to a boat hook and tossed it to snag the rail, but the hook missed. The other boat drifted 5 feet away and I let it go. I wasn't about to chase it in the fog. There was a smell though, something like mildew and faint rot. I caught it only for a second. The current pulled the boat west and the fog swallowed it again. I recorded it in the log. Drifting sloop, 30 to 32 feet. Visible damage, 1 body, no movement. Unknown risk level. No contact made. The fog stayed through most of the day. I sat with the oar across my lap and watched the water. You can go crazy doing that, but you'll also survive longer. I saw another object drift past just before sunset. Not a boat, a life jacket. Empty. I got a fish that night. 1 cast from the stern with a spoon jig, and I pulled up a small mackerel. Good color, no signs of sickness. I cleaned it with salt water and vinegar, boiled it, and ate every piece I could get off the bones. Haven't tasted fresh meat in over a week. I buried the guts over the side with a weighted bag and triple knotted the line so nothing would trail behind the hull. Fog finally broke the next morning. I woke up to sunlight blinding through the hatch like someone turned on a spotlight. Everything steamed. The deck was soaked. My gear was slick with condensation, but the sky was blue, and I could see all the way to the horizon. I scanned for the Esperan, whatever that boat's name was, but it was gone. Not a trace. No sails, no wake, nothing. Could have drifted 20 miles in the dark. Could have sunk. I added that to the log. I started tightening security again. I cut and installed a second deadbolt on the cabin door using hardware I salvaged from an old lockbox. I moved the emergency beacon below deck and mounted it near the stove where I can hit it with one hand. I re-inventoried every food container, found 2 with pinholes, and pitched them overboard after soaking the labels in bleach water. I'm not letting rot set in. That afternoon, I spent time repairing sail stitching. The main's leech line had started fraying. I took it down, laid it across the deck, and worked the needle by hand until my fingers cramped. The whole time I kept looking up, checking the waterline, scanning the distance. There was no reason for anyone to be out here anymore, but I couldn't stop thinking about the skiff and the body inside it. That wasn't a one-time thing. The ocean's pulling things loose from the shore now. Boats, debris, infected, maybe worse. The nights have started feeling longer. I've never been someone who scares easy, but I've also never lived through the fall of civilization. The past few nights, I haven't been able to keep still once the sun goes down. I check the lifelines 3 times, lock the hatch, wedge a folding chair against the doorframe, then just sit and wait. Even the ocean sounds feel off, quiet in a way that doesn't comfort anymore. It's not peaceful, it's empty. A few days ago, I spotted something strange floating near the southern edge of the drift line. I was filtering water through the tarp system when I noticed what looked like a string of plastic drums bobbing in a loose cluster. At first, I thought it might be trash from a capsized boat. Maybe someone tried to make a makeshift raft. But when I looked closer through the binoculars, I counted 5 of them, all tied together. No signs of life, no flag, nothing with a name. The current dragged them west, slow and steady. I wrote it down. Another anomaly, another marker that the world isn't resetting. It's unraveling. I haven't had a decent conversation in 16 days. I tried talking to myself a few times, just to keep the rhythm of speech. I ran through old fishing stories I used to tell clients on charter trips, played out both sides, even faked some laughs. It didn't help much. Silence sits heavier now. I keep the portable FM radio on for background noise when I work below deck, but all it does is hiss. Yesterday, I risked motoring closer to shore to look for any signs of movement inland. I didn't go past 5 miles, just far enough to get a better look through the scope. There's a barrier island near the northern channel with a few vacation homes on stilts. Used to take tourists there sometimes. From the water, it looked like 2 of the houses had burned. One was still smoldering. No people in sight. No boats tied off. The docks were gone, washed away or pulled apart by hand. I circled back out without stopping. There's nothing left there. Fuel's still okay. I siphon carefully, keep all containers sealed with marine tape, and only run the engine at low throttle when repositioning. I calculated I've got about 13 hours of propulsion left if I keep using 1-gallon increments. That gives me options, not comfort. If I burn too much now, I'll have nothing left when I really need to move. I had a bad night 2 days ago. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to the noise of something brushing the hull. It wasn't violent, just a soft, rhythmic bump against the side. I came up with the flashlight, swept the waterline, and saw a broken paddleboard drifting half-submerged near the bow. It was dragging a length of cord that had caught on my anchor line. I used a boat hook to push it away, then stayed on watch until morning. Nothing else surfaced, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was testing the perimeter, even if it was just in my head. That's the problem with being alone this long. You stop trusting what's real. The mind doesn't like quiet for too long. It starts filling in the blanks with whatever's worst. I've taken to checking my depth manually each morning now. The depth finder still works, but I want to be sure. The old lead line hasn't failed me yet. I mark it in chalk, same as I used to teach clients. Hands-on skills last longer than batteries. This morning, I found new scratches on the starboard hull. Not deep, not fresh, but they weren't there 3 days ago. Could have been from flotsam. Could have been something trying to climb aboard. I checked every inch of the deck. Nothing missing, nothing tampered with. But it made me change my sleep routine again. Now I keep the machete unsheathed near the hatch. No sense in keeping it buried in a locker if the deck gets breached. Food's holding steady. I'm down to a rotation of beans, rice, and a small stash of smoked fish I vacuum sealed last year. I stretch the protein with broth when I can. I haven't touched the backup emergency rations yet. Those stay sealed in the bilge until the rest runs dry. I've started seeing more birds again. Only a few, and only at high altitude. Gulls mostly. Not roosting, not diving, just gliding over the water like they're looking for a place that doesn't exist anymore. The first few weeks, there was nothing. Now they're coming back. That means the infection hasn't killed off everything on land. At least not yet. The nights are when it gets hardest to think straight. You go over things too many times. Did I miss a signal? Should I have followed the Esperon when I had the chance? Is there another boat out here somewhere with a crew that's still talking to each other? I replay the radio sweep every night, but all I ever hear are broken pings and silence. Earlier today, I thought I saw a sail in the distance. I scrambled for the scope and locked in on the bearing. It was a white triangle moving east to west, barely visible against the morning haze. It was upwind, too far for me to intercept, and vanished within 10 minutes. Could have been another drifter. Could have been someone sailing silent like me. I didn't raise the radio. I just watched. I wonder sometimes if I've made myself too invisible. I wanted to stay off the radar to avoid the desperate ones, but now I wonder if anyone out there even knows I'm alive. I've logged 22 days at sea now. The fuel is still measured, the food is still counted, the water gets filtered and rotated, but I don't know how long that matters if there's no one else keeping a calendar. Tomorrow I'll test the backup batteries. I've been keeping them stored in a dry locker under the aft berth. If they hold a charge, I can power the longer range receiver and see if I can pick up anything beyond the immediate coast. There used to be a NOAA repeater farther west near the loop current. If it's still running, I might catch a drift of transmission. The idea of sailing farther into open water feels wrong. It's not about skill. I've done offshore runs solo before, but this feels different. Back then, you knew there was a shore waiting, a port, a dock, a harbour master with a clipboard. Now it's just more water, and eventually, that runs out too. I haven't decided what my line in the sand is. I keep telling myself, I'll go ashore if I run out of propane, or when the food gets below 10%, or when the batteries all fail. But the truth is, I don't know if I'll ever trust land again. Every story I've heard about what's happening inland ends the same way. Panic, collapse, infection, and then it goes quiet. I can't tell if staying offshore is keeping me alive or just dragging things out. The silence used to mean safety. Now it just means nothing's left to hear. I woke up this morning to the sound of the wind turning over the top of the solar panel mounts. That used to be normal. But now, every unfamiliar sound triggers a chain of movement. Get up, check the hatch, check the sides, confirm no new shadows on deck. I did another full inventory today. I sat on the floor near the galley with a flashlight clipped to the overhead rail and counted every single item, even the ones I've been avoiding. I have 22 cans of food left. 7 of them are low-calorie, mostly vegetable broth or fruit in syrup. I've got 2 cans of corned beef, 1 of sardines, and 3 small tins of chicken. The rest are a mix. 1 propane cylinder is nearly out. The second has maybe 2 days of moderate use left. I'm down to 1 sealed container of potable water. The filtration system is still working, but if the weather dries out again, I won't keep pace. I logged it all in the notebook in red ink. I've been stretching meals longer than I probably should. 1 can of beans split into 2 meals, half a scoop of rice, a pinch of powdered bouillon. I tell myself I'm just being careful, but I'm avoiding the math. I know how many calories I need, and I'm not hitting that number anymore. Not even close. I spent the early afternoon checking over the rigging again, not because it needed it, but because it kept my hands moving. I ran the length of both halyards, double-checked the winches, lubricated the block on the boom, and cleared 2 small salt blisters from the underside of the deck cleats. Nothing was wrong, but I still did it again. I've started repeating tasks more and more. Sometimes I catch myself halfway through something I know I already finished. Doesn't matter, I keep going. Around 3 in the afternoon, I spotted land again. Barely. A rise on the horizon to the northeast. Looked like the edge of one of the outer keys, or maybe a sandbar that had built up over the years. I used the binoculars to scan the area. Nothing moved. No boats. No people. But there were structures. A small, weather-worn house or shack right at the edge of the tree line. Looked abandoned. Could have been a fisherman's place once. There was also something else. Maybe a pier, collapsed into the water, or an old dock that had lost its planks. I watched it for half an hour, hoping for signs of movement, hoping not to see any. I marked the bearing and distance on the map and circled it. The temptation is there. The idea of stepping onto dry ground, even just for an hour, just to stretch my legs. Maybe find something useful. But the risk is too high. I remember the man in the skiff. If he could float all the way out here without being noticed, there's no telling what might be lurking near that shack. One wrong step and it's over. But I'm running out of alternatives. I've already cut back on everything except water. I can't stretch what I have much longer. That made me finally pull out the sealed dry bag from under the forward berth. Inside it are maps I hadn't touched since leaving the dock. Long-distance ones. South routes. I spread them out on the chart table and ran through every option that didn't involve landfall on US soil. Cuba's too far without full tanks, and if it's infected there, I'd be trapped. Same for the Yucatan. The currents help, but not enough. Key West might be reachable, but I have no intel on it. If it's anything like the mainland, I'd be landing in chaos. Bahamas are a long shot. That leaves only one realistic option. Keep moving slowly along the outer fringe of the Gulf, scavenging what I can from floating debris, and hoping I find a better answer before the supplies run dry. That's not a plan. It's a delay. I know that. Just after sunset, I decided to change tactics. I hadn't tried broadcasting in almost a week. Not directly. So I recorded a message using the handheld and rigged the old antenna extension to run off the backstay. I kept it short, clear, and emotionless. This is the sailing vessel Maribel. I am alone, currently positioned off the Gulf Coast, 70 miles west of Tampa, 22 days at sea, seeking contact with any surviving vessels or shore stations. Supplies limited. I am healthy. I am not infected. Broadcasting every 2 hours on 16 and 72. Over. I set the message to repeat on a delay loop and ran it through the inverter. Low power. Enough to reach line of sight if someone's listening. Probably won't do a thing, but it's better than sitting in silence waiting to rot in my own cabin. Tonight I cleared off the top deck and laid down for an hour to rest. I didn't sleep. I stared at the stars, counted planes. There weren't any. The air's been dead above me for weeks. I used to spot high-altitude trails all the time. Military, commercial, private. Now nothing. I think the sky is empty now. I finally admitted something I didn't want to write down before. I've been talking to Joyce more lately. Not out loud, but in my head. Long stretches, conversations. She never responds, of course, but I fill in what she would have said, what she would have laughed at, what she would have hated. She always hated beans. I have 6 more cans of them left. Tomorrow I'll go through the emergency gear again. I have a small reserve of signal flares, some expired medkits, and a rusted fishing reel I haven't used in over 10 years. I'll strip it down, oil it, see if I can make it work. If nothing else, it gives me something to do. If I don't stay busy, I'll spiral. Before dark, I heard something that stopped me cold. Not a sound on the water, but above it, a faint mechanical rhythm. I grabbed the scope and scanned the eastern sky. It took 10 minutes to catch it. A tiny shape moving just under the clouds. A helicopter, too high to hear clearly, too fast to follow. It was heading southeast, painted dark, no lights, no markings I could make out. I watched it disappear over the horizon. I don't know where it was going, but if someone's still flying, then someone still has power, fuel, infrastructure, orders. The sight of it messed with my head more than I expected. It didn't give me hope. It made me feel more isolated, like someone had drawn a line between the survivors who matter and the ones who got left behind. I'm not important. I'm just a man in an old boat drifting around in the leftovers. Still, I made a decision. I'm going to sail south tomorrow. Just a little, 10 miles, maybe 15. I'll shadow the coast but keep my distance. If I find another abandoned boat, I'll board it. If I see a signal or a fire, I'll check from a safe distance. I'm not going to sit still anymore. Movement is risk, but stagnation is death. The next morning, I pulled anchor before first light. I didn't want to lose time waiting for full visibility. I already had the main prepped and reefed, the jib tied off for solo control. Wind was light but steady from the northeast. Not ideal, but enough to move without burning fuel. I kept the engine idle and ready in case I needed to correct my course fast. Everything was strapped down. I ran a double check on the gear and left the cabin locked with supplies stowed in sealed compartments. I knew there was a chance I wouldn't come back the same way I left. As I pushed off, I stayed close to my bearing. No more than 2 or 3 degrees of drift in any direction. The morning sea was flat, a faint chop under the bow but nothing to strain the lines. I passed a flock of pelicans moving west in formation. First time I'd seen that many birds at once since this started. It meant the fish were still moving through the area. It meant nature hadn't shut off entirely. That gave me something. After about 6 miles, I spotted a boat dead ahead. It was low in the water and barely moving. I altered course, brought Maribel around slowly, and approached from the windward side to avoid alerting anything, or anyone, on board. It was a center console fishing boat, about 24 feet, fiberglass hull, Yamaha motor hanging limp off the transom. No power, no visible lights. It drifted with the current and rocked gently in the swell. There was no name visible. I drew close enough to toss a line. No response. I circled once, looking for movement. No signs of blood or bodies on deck. Just some scattered gear, a cooler, a life jacket balled up under the leaning post. I looped the line, climbed down into the skiff, and rowed the short distance over, tied off, climbed aboard. I stayed low, listened first. No breathing, no shuffling, no smell of rot. Still, I didn't trust it. I moved from stern to bow with the gaff in hand. The boat was empty. The cabin was unlocked but clean. Someone had been fishing recently. Hooks were still stuck in a foam block, and there were 2 bait buckets sloshing with seawater. No blood, no torn clothing, but also no radio, no phone, no log, no person. I took what I could. A small tackle box, 3 bottles of water, 1 energy bar sealed in its wrapper. I didn't touch the buckets. I didn't want to risk cross-contamination. I marked the hull with a grease pencil, cleared, and the date, and pushed it off again. It was a ghost boat, nothing more. By noon, the sky turned. Fast-moving clouds came in from the east. I checked the barometer and it had dropped 3 millibars in the last hour. Not a storm yet, but something was brewing. I trimmed the sails, took in a reef, and adjusted course southwest. I didn't want to be near shore if the wind picked up. There's nothing to break a squall out here but distance. 3 hours later, I saw the second one. It was a sailboat, 35 to 40 feet, steel hull, sitting low and listing slightly to port. Sails were torn. The mast was cracked near the spreaders. Looked like it took a hard knock and someone jury-rigged it to stay upright. I approached slow. No movement. No radio response. The smell hit first. I boarded anyway. Deck was coated in dried salt and grime, lines tangled. A foul stench drifted up from the cabin. I stayed low, opened the hatch carefully, and waited. No sound. Just a wave of hot air and the unmistakable odor of a sealed space gone wrong. Inside, I found what was left of 2 people. One near the galley, face down, dried blood pooled beneath. The other slumped against the head door, back broken against the frame. Both had wounds, bite marks, torn flesh, defensive cuts. One had a knife still gripped in his hand. Neither moved. I didn't touch them. I didn't bury them. There wasn't time. I just took what I could find that wouldn't risk contact. 2 emergency rations in vacuum packs, a solar lantern, 1 handheld GPS with cracked screen but working interface. I took it all, sealed in my own dry bag, sanitized. Then I left the cabin open so the wind would carry the smell away from the next person who found it. I marked that boat too, infected, 2 bodies, and set a small line flag from the bow rail. I don't know who will ever see it, but I wanted someone to know. The weather kept turning. The sea grew darker. By early evening, a squall line appeared behind me. I had to decide fast. Run in towards shore or ride it out. I stayed offshore, turned downwind, dropped sail, started the engine, and kept my heading to avoid cross seas. The rain came in sideways. Visibility dropped to less than a quarter mile. I lost sight of every reference point. I relied on the compass and the feel of the hull. I lashed the tiller, stayed crouched by the companionway, and kept checking battery output every 15 minutes. The solar charger had taken in enough juice for the night, but if anything shorted, I'd be blind. It lasted just over 2 hours. No thunder, no lightning, just rain and noise and motion. When it passed, the sea flattened, the sky cracked open, and the wind died completely. I was soaked, cold, shaking from tension but unhurt. I logged the storm with time and approximate position. Then I sat for a long time without moving. Later that night, while cleaning gear on the deck, I saw another light. It wasn't on a mast or from land. It was low, maybe 10 feet off the water, blinking slow, white, then dark, then white again. It wasn't moving much. I watched it for 10 minutes before deciding to investigate. Tied a flare gun to my belt. Brought the boat around. It was a life raft, inflatable, partially deflated on one side, canopy torn. A small LED beacon attached to the top arch. No sounds. I came close, shined the flashlight across the surface. Inside was a child. Maybe 10, maybe younger, lying curled in the corner, covered in a blanket, still breathing. I almost didn't believe it. I dropped to my knees and called out. He stirred, blinked, tried to sit up but failed. I pulled him aboard. He was dehydrated, sunburned, and barely conscious. No wounds, no bites, just weak. No one else in the raft. No supplies. I carried him below, gave him water, started rehydration with what little I had. He couldn't speak at first, just nodded or shook his head. He's asleep now, in the forward berth, wrapped in blankets. I gave him the last of the canned pears. He smiled before he passed out. I don't know where he came from. I don't know what happened to the others. But someone put him in that raft, strapped a light to it, and set it adrift. Someone tried to save him. I carried him below and checked for bites again, this time under better light. No broken skin, no fever, pupils responsive. I mixed a small batch of water with oral rehydration salts, waited 5 minutes, then gave him a teaspoon at a time. He kept it down. I set a timer for 3 minutes between doses and did the same thing again. Slow is the only way that works when a person is dried out this far. I propped him on his side with a rolled towel, tucked the blanket tighter, and put a bucket within reach in case he got sick. When I looked up, the cabin felt smaller than it had all month. I needed to change the routine immediately. I set the portable carbon monoxide alarm on the cabin shelf, cracked the forward hatch 2 inches for airflow, and moved the flare gun and machete to the companionway. I took the spare child life jacket from the locker, still smelled of new plastic, and left it at the foot of the berth. I pulled the radio mic and recorded a new message. This is the sailing vessel Maribel. 1 miner rescued from a life raft, alive and stable. We are healthy. We are moving south at slow speed. If you are a friendly vessel or shore station and can confirm safe harbor with medical supplies, respond on channel 16 or channel 72. Over. No answer. The set went quiet except for the soft hiss that never quite goes away. I switched to scan, left it running at low volume, and went back to the kid. He stirred and tried to speak. I told him to rest. He nodded once and closed his eyes. I stayed up through the next 2 hours watching the water. The squall line had moved on and left the surface flat. The raft, now empty, drifted 10 yards off the stern, bumping against a scrap of netting and then floating free again. I tied a glow stick to a piece of line and tossed it out to act as a lazy marker for current direction. It tracked south-southwest. That suited me fine. Before dawn, the kid woke and whispered one word, "Ben." He was hoarse, barely there. I told him my name and to sleep more. He held the spoon by himself and took 2 careful sips. He slept again. Morning came in clear and bright. The sea went from dull grey to plain blue in 10 minutes. I put a pot on for warm water and made a thin mash of rice and salt. When Ben woke again, I gave him 2 spoonfuls. He asked for more with his eyes. I gave him 2 more and then stopped. He did not fight me about it. That was a good sign. I shifted the plan. The southbound run would continue, but with tight rules. No boarding at night. No engine unless I had to. No bringing anything aboard until I bleached it, rinsed it, dried it, and checked it twice. Kid or no kid, infection control still rules the boat. I wrote the rules on a piece of taped paper near the galley. No shoes below, wash hands with bleach water, eat slow, drink slow, no leaning over the rail without a line on. I raised the main, left 1 reef in, and unrolled a handkerchief of jib. The wind was steady out of the east, enough to give me 4 knots. The hull creaked, then settled. I put Maribel on a south-southwest heading to keep us off the shoals and parallel to the coast. I checked the chart again and marked a half circle around a cluster of markers that used to mark a shrimp fleet anchorage. If those ships were abandoned, they might carry fuel, water, or food. If they were not abandoned, I would see from a distance and pass by. An hour later, the radio cracked and gave me a burst of words. Not a match to my message. A different voice, thinner, offset by static. Station, 2 miles, fuel low, hold position. I grabbed the mic and repeated my call with position. Nothing came back. I tried twice more, and then stopped. Chasing ghosts burns daylight and attention. Ben woke and tried to sit. I helped him prop against a pillow and gave him a little more water. He whispered a question. "Where's Mum?" I said I did not know. I said we would look for signs of her, or anyone who knew her. He pressed his lips and did not speak again for a while. He looked at the child life jacket at his feet and put it on without a word. I adjusted the straps and tightened the chest band. By late morning, the water changed color under the bow. Darker streaks, not oil, weed lines, and then debris. Coolers, a plastic chair, 2 5-gallon jugs half full and bouncing. I came up into the wind, let Maribel lose speed, and drifted toward the jugs. I used the boat hook to pull them close, kept them in the water while I bleached the outsides, then hauled them aboard and marked them unknown. One smelled like diesel, the other smelled like fresh water. I set them in the sun to watch for leaks. I saw the shrimpers just after noon. 5 hulls, red and white paint flaking. Nets hung in frozen curtains from the outriggers. 2 sat lower than the others by the stern. Ice holds flooded maybe. No lights. No movement. The closest one had a name I could read even at this distance. Annalise. The others were weathered to bare metal. This is where anyone with sense would turn away. Trawlers hold everything a person needs, and everything a person does not want. Food, fuel, water, knives, hooks, tight spaces, and places to hide. But the kid needed more than I had. I brought us around on a slow circle and watched the decks for movement. No shadows crossed. No birds lifted into the air. I took in the jib, started the engine at idle, and eased us to a fender kiss against the trawler's aft quarter. I told Ben the rule. Stay below. Hatch cracked. Knife by the companionway. He nodded. I handed him a whistle and said, "Blow if you hear anything on deck." He held it and did not let go. I boarded Annalise with the gaff in my right hand and a bleach bottle in my left. The stern deck was slick with old fish scales and rainwater. The door to the cabin was open. The smell was bad but not overwhelming. I stood still for a full minute and listened. Nothing. I called out once, low. No answer. Inside, I found a galley with 2 bunks and a small mess area, a radio set on the bulkhead with a broken mic, a pantry cabinet with the door off its hinges. I checked the shelves before touching anything. 3 sealed jars of peanut butter, a bag of rice in a bucket, a half crate of canned tomatoes. No bite marks on the cans, no bulges. I sprayed the outsides with bleach, waited, then put them in my dry bag. The wheelhouse had a chart still spread across the table and a pencil line that ran straight offshore and then curved east. Someone left in a hurry or got pulled off their course by weather. The breaker panel was dead. I tested a work light from my pocket battery and swept the beams across the corners. No movement. I found a used first aid kit with 2 sealed saline vials. I added them to the bag. The holds were the problem. The starboard one sloshed and smelled wrong. I did not open it. The porthold was empty with the hatch dogged open, probably to keep rot from getting worse. I leaned into the opening just enough to check the ladder. Clear. When I turned to back out, the gaff tip caught on a loose coil of line and tugged something from under the bench near my knee. A shoe scraped the deck. That small sound told me what I had missed. I rolled right, brought the gaff up, and saw him half stand from the shadows with a bobbing stumble that did not match a living person. He was a man in his 30s or 40s, soaked and sunburned, with a deep tear on his forearm and a soft grey look in his face that anyone would recognize by now. He moved without care for his weight or balance. He reached, not smart, just direct. I jabbed with the gaff, caught him in the chest and shoved. He slammed into the bulkhead, lurched again, and I shoved harder. The gaff bent and groaned, but the point stayed in. He slid to the deck and kept trying to crawl forward. I held him there, breathing through my mouth, and grabbed the emergency fire axe from the wheelhouse wall. I ended it clean. No yelling, no ceremony. 1 strike. Then I waited, counted to 60, and waited longer. It was quiet again. I dragged him to the aft deck, pushed him over the side, and watched for a moment to be sure he did not move. He did not. I checked the rest of the cabin twice. There was no one else. I took what I could carry safely, 2 gallons of sealed water, a half bag of pasta still in plastic, the peanut butter and tomatoes, a child-size rain jacket in a locker with 3 small hooks and a sticker sheet stuck to the door. That hit me in a way I did not expect. I put it in the bag and moved on before my head got stuck there. On the way out, I saw the engine room hatch and cracked it open with my boot. Diesel smell, faint, but present. I spotted a transfer pump and hose in the corner, capped and clean. The tank gauge read under a quarter, enough to make the effort worth it. I clipped the hose to my belt, went back to Maribel, and set a fueling line through a filter funnel. I bled the pump into a jar to flush it and then filled 2 jerry cans. I could have taken more, but greed gets sailors killed. I stowed the cans, secured the deck, and cast off. Back on Maribel, Ben sat up, awake, whistle in hand. He saw the new food and held the jacket. He did not ask where it came from. I told him it would fit him, and that he should keep it dry. He nodded, and put it at his feet next to the life jacket. We moved away from the shrimpers and set a new course 2 points farther offshore. The sky grew hazy with heat. The sea built into short waves that slapped the bow but did not slow us much. I gave Ben a few noodles in broth and half an energy bar. He thanked me, quiet. I told him we would do simple jobs together, counting cans, tying a cleat hitch, standing watch for 10 minutes at a time. He listened carefully and repeated instructions back. His focus was sharp. That was another good sign. Just before sunset, we passed a stilt house on pilings out over shallow water. I had seen similar places years ago on runs along this coast. This one leaned slightly and had a rain barrel on the deck under a gutter spout. The barrel looked full. I hove to at a safe distance and watched the windows. Nothing moved. I saw no footprints, no scuff marks on the ladder, and no hanging laundry. I took the skiff anyway. I told Ben to stay with his whistle behind the locked hatch. He did not argue. I rowed in slow, tied off at the ladder, and tested the first 3 steps with my weight. Sound enough? I climbed, kept low, and reached the deck. The barrel lid was strapped with a bungee. I loosened it, dipped a test cup, and smelled. Rainwater. No algae bloom, no bugs on the surface. I added a few drops of bleach, stirred with a clean stick, waited a minute, then siphoned half of it into my 2 jugs. I listened the whole time. At one point I heard a thump inside the house and froze, then another one, soft, regular. I got low and moved to the window. Inside, a man lay on the floor near the couch. His lower leg was missing below the knee, wrapped with a belt, and the room smelled of old bandages and bad decisions. He was not moving. His chest did not rise. I watched for 30 seconds, then longer. When I stood to leave, his hand moved an inch. Not a twitch, a reach. The thump had been his arm trying to find the table leg again. He did not see me through the window. His head never turned. I left the deck without touching the door. Back aboard, I filtered the water again through a clean cloth and set both jugs in the shade. Ben watched my hands the way a student watches a teacher who might turn and check the work. I showed him the bleach ratio and wrote it on tape above the sink. He read the numbers to me under his breath. Night brought steady wind and a wide horizon. I put Ben on a 5-minute watch in the companionway to call out light or wake. He took it seriously. He tracked the masthead light sway and the distance glow on the shore. He did not once take his eyes off the sector I assigned. When he got tired, he said so. I let him sleep and took the rest of the watch. Toward midnight, we had another visitor. It started with a scrape against the stern and the soft rattle of the copper noise line. I grabbed the boat hook and went aft. A small pontoon boat wandered across the swell and tapped our quarter. The deck was crowded with patio chairs and a grill. A string of small party lights hung useless along the rail. 2 shapes stood near the bow, swaying with the motion in a stiff, unnatural way. One wore a life vest. The other had a torn shirt and a long stain down the chest that had dried into dark patches. I kept the boat hook ready and did not say a word. The 2 stepped forward in unison, reached over the rail with slow, grinding persistence, and grabbed at air 2 feet short of my position. The pontoon drifted past our stern and caught on the trailing line from the empty raft. The jerk pulled them back. One lost footing and went face first onto the deck. The other turned its head and kept reaching for where I had been, not where I was. No thinking, no learning, just reach. I did not board. I cut the raft line, let the pontoon drift clear, and watched it slide away into the dark. Ben had woken and stood behind me with the whistle in his hand. I told him to go below and he did. I stayed out another hour until the horizon was empty again. The next day ran by the book, wind 12 knots, heading south-southwest, speed 3 to 4 knots. One hand on the tiller, one eye on the water. I set Ben to work cleaning the peanut butter jars and stacking the canned goods by type. He asked one question at breakfast: "How far will we go?" I told him we would go as far as we needed to find a place that makes sense. He nodded at that like he accepted a job with no end date. Around midday we found another drift line. Buckets, rope, a cracked toolbox with a rusted hinge. Inside the box were 3 screwdrivers, a set of hex keys, and a sealed pack of batteries. I bleached the outside, rinsed, and set the contents to dry. The batteries made me feel rich for an hour. Small things matter. By late afternoon, the sky went hazy again, and the sea went dead flat. I turned the radio to the long-range receiver and scanned slowly. At 2:50 on the dial, a weak voice came through. A woman, tired but steady. The accent sounded Gulf Coast. Medical needed at Pier 3 Bayport. Water low. Floodlights failed. Do not approach at night. The transmission cut and repeated. It sounded recorded. It mentioned no date. It could have been days old or an hour old. I marked the position on the chart and stared at it until the pencil dot felt like a weight I could pick up. I did not change course. A pier and floodlights means people. People means infection can get in. I will not bring Ben to a gate that others fight over. We sailed on through calm and then into light chop. Just before sunset, I spotted a line of trees on the horizon that told me we were parallel to a wider inlet. A pair of small boats sat near the mouth, grounded on a sandbar, half in and half out of the water. One had a blue tarp draped across the bow. 2 figures stood knee-deep on the bar between them, moving slow, arms out, facing the sound of our hull. I adjusted course a point away and watched them turn their heads to track the noise. One waded forward, tripped, fell, and stood again. Their heads never moved right. There was nothing behind the eyes. I held course and slid by at a safe distance. Ben watched through the porthole and did not speak. Night came simple. I put us on a broad reach, set the wind vane, and let Maribel hold steady. I put Ben on his 5-minute watch again, then readied 2 lines for trolling at sunup. The plan from here is straight. Keep south. Use the outer edge of the current to save fuel. Board only vessels that look clean and have clear deck plans. Avoid any place with noise, light, or crowds. Teach Ben enough that he can take the tiller for a stretch without me breathing down his neck. Rest in short blocks. Eat simple. Drink on schedule. Clean every day. The ending I wanted when I set out does not exist. There is no big harbor opening wide with a band and a dockmaster. There is no helicopter circling down with hand signals and a smiling crew. There is the boat I know, the boy who is now my crew, and the line of water ahead. We did have one small surprise before dawn. A calm voice came through on 16 at low power, the kind of voice that waits for confirmation rather than asks for it. Maribel, this is Kestrel. If you copy, change to 7-2. I stared at the radio and weighed the choice. I switched and answered with position vague by 10 miles. The voice replied with a simple instruction. Keep south. Avoid Bayport. We saw a flare on the wreck line at sunset. Do not go ashore at the stilt houses 2 miles east of Marker 9. Not safe. I asked how they knew our name. The voice said, you broadcast it last night. Then the carrier dropped. Ben asked if that meant we were not alone. I told him it means someone else is listening, and that is enough for today. He smiled for the first time since I pulled him from the raft. It was a small thing. It still changed the weight in the cabin. We ate rice with a spoon of peanut butter stirred in, which is a meal I would not have touched when the world had choices. I told Ben about Joyce, and he told me about a dog named Cricket that used to sleep on his shoes. He said the dog hated boat ramps and loved ice cubes. It was not much, and it was everything, because it sounded like a person telling a normal story and not someone issuing a warning. I logged our course and wrote the day's line the way I always do. Wind, speed, position, and one sentence that tries to say what cannot fit in a column. I wrote, 2 aboard now, boat steady, food and water improved, infected at distance. Not a problem unless we make it one. Tomorrow I will rig a second rain catch, teach Ben a bowline, and show him how to check the telltales on the jib. Tomorrow we will scan again for Kestrel and log any signal. Tomorrow we will pass more debris and maybe one more boat with enough on it to make the day easier. There will be a few of the infected on the water or near it, because that is how the world is now. We will keep our distance and keep moving. If I have learned anything from these weeks alone and the last 2 days with Ben, it is that the sea does not care who is right or brave or prepared. The sea rewards patience and punishes mistakes. I can work with that. A rule that does not change is a kind of mercy. South is still open, the sails still fill, the compass still points. The boy sleeps with a whistle in his hand and a rain jacket at his feet. I stand watch and write the next plan on a piece of tape and stick it above the stove where the heat will dry the ink and make the words set. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening till the end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership, Carlos Herrera, Luca Mod, Jadala, The Great Anywho, Madam Midnight. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.